starting to relax some of the zoning laws, especially in a more working-class neighborhood like Altadena. We allow developers to start putting up duplexes and apartments.
If we close one station, if we close one resource, the residents of Los Angeles are going to pay the ultimate sacrifice, and someone will die.
Crowley should have been screaming at the public since assuming office in 2022 about potential lethal catastrophe looming due to underfunding resourcing of LAFD. Did nothing because she's an appointed lapdog.
Ever since Los Angeles burst into flames, I've been telling you that this disaster could have been avoided. Altadena did not have to burn. Folks wouldn't have lost their homes had the people in power done what was needed. However, ever since it all began, I've also been looking to answer one simple question: who will benefit from this destruction? Well, I think I finally have a theory that makes sense and explains why Newsom is so eager to rebuild and why his actions will only help a very select group of people. And we're gonna start things off with this guy. His name is Leo Pastilnikov, and I'm sure most of you have never ever even heard of him. And to be honest, neither had I. Not until I started going down this rabbit hole of zoning laws and low-income multifamily housing. And Google was no help in my search. Most articles I saw were hidden behind a paywall, and those only really told me that he was a real estate developer and founder of SLH Investments. Now, some articles did tell me that he bought 17 buildings on Skid Row for just $10 million. And this deal got me interested, so I decided to dig deeper. And that's when I came across a bunch of interesting things. For instance, his deal to acquire those 17 buildings has given him 1,200 units in downtown LA. According to the deal, he had to pay $19 million for the portfolio, and he'll get $9 million back for repairs and renovations of these properties. Now, some people might say these buildings contain low-income housing units, and surely Leo can't just turn them into luxury apartment complexes, and you'd be right. Mr. Pastilnikov has agreed to offer on-site supportive services to tenants and maintain the properties as affordable housing. However, this is not the entire story. You see, this investor has a history with these single-room low-income housing complexes, which are commonly known as SROs. In 2016, he bought 3 old SROs along 5th Street on Skid Row. And within 2 years, Leo sold the Baltimore and King Edward hotels to the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. And he did the same with the Leland in 2022. Stick with me here. And after buying the hotels, the AIDS charities struggled to operate the buildings in part because of their aging plumbing, heating, and other infrastructure. So not only did Leo keep these hotels mostly vacant, even though they were meant for the homeless people of LA, but he also did not complete renovations, leading to problems for the next owner. And despite these problems, Leo himself agreed that he made a $10 million profit when he sold those buildings for $43 million. And I think you'll agree, he's going to make even more money when he sells these 17 buildings in the future. So the question is, why in the world is Gavin Newsom and his government wanting to help Leo build even more buildings all over Southern California? Well, let me tell you why. You see, Leo Pastilnikov is the most aggressive investor using builder's remedy for their benefit. Now, you might be asking, what the heck is builder's remedy? The builder's remedy is a legal tool that allows developers to build housing that doesn't meet local zoning requirements. It's used when a municipality isn't following state housing laws. And this law, my friends, is what's gonna be used to remove the concept of single-family homes from this country. I know, I sound a bit dramatic, but just let me explain. Builder's remedy basically allows investors to build however many high-rise buildings they want, as long as those buildings comply with California's environmental laws and have 20 of their units set aside for low-income households. And on top of this, you can build in any city that has failed to provide plans to accommodate future residential growth. This law basically compels cities to allow you to build without any zoning restrictions. And this is the most evil thing about this plan. Most families have to pay so much extra to build homes in California because of these damn zoning laws and all the other red tape. Meanwhile, these rich investors can now build without any problems whatsoever. And for the last year or so, Newsom has been basically doing anything he can to help these investors. Even though these high-rise buildings will likely hurt the very nature he supposedly wants to protect. Now, to their credit, these local communities and municipalities have been trying their best to stop these greedy investors. For instance, last February, an LA Superior Court judge ruled in favor of the city of Redondo Beach and put a stop to Leo's mixed-use project at the former SEA lab site on Harbor Drive. Now, the interesting thing is that Judge James sided with the city in its assessment that Pastilnikov's application was incomplete since it did not align with the State Coastal Act. And by sheer coincidence, Newsom has signed an executive order that suspended CEQA review and California Coastal Act, permitting for reconstruction of properties substantially damaged or destroyed in recent Southern California wildfires. Now, my question is, do you think all of those people who just lost their homes are going to be able to rebuild? We already know the insurance situation for most of these burnt down houses.
Having escaped the fires in LA, many people are now realizing they're never going to be able to return home. Why? Because they didn't have insurance. And it gets even worse when you consider, because of these fires, insurance is going to be even harder to get.
The insurance lawsuits are starting. For the last couple of years, insurance have been canceling policies based on claims gathered by drone photography that may not be true. I have had a ton of clients have their insurance canceled out of the blue. One client, they claimed there was standing water on his sloped driveway, which wouldn't have been possible. But he fought back and they canceled anyways. Another one, they told them their roof needed to be replaced. And rather than seeking another policy, they spent $40,000 on a roof. And then the insurance increased by $15,000 a year. Another client, they told him he had to replace the roof. And he called me and said, "Rebecca, what should I do?" I said, find another insurance company, because once you replace the roof, they're either going to find something else or up the cost so high, you're going to find someone else. And that's what he did. I've seen insurance canceled for cracks in the driveway or raised sidewalks, which are technically the city's responsibility. A woman in Poway, California got notice that a drone had flown over her roof and spotted mold and mildew. And so Liberty Mutual was canceling her 30-year policy. She asked for the photo, and it was blurry at best and didn't show anything that indicated mold or mildew clearly. She hired a licensed roofer to come out and inspect her roof, and they said it was in impeccable condition. No mold or mildew to be found, and no other issues. She sent the report to Liberty Mutual, who completely ignored it and canceled her policy anyways.
We also know what's going to happen because it already happened in Paradise, California after the fire destroyed the entire town. Even if insurance companies are able to miraculously pay all the people, and that's a big if, people simply will not be able to insure their houses. Most companies will not offer insurance anymore, and the ones that do ask people to pay annual premiums that are 10 times more than what folks used to pay. And speaking of Paradise, victims only received less than 1%, even a full year after PG&E paid $13.5 billion in damages. And that deal was also backed by Gavin Newsom.
Why is it okay for you to take money from a felon?
I don't know what you're
PG&E was convicted of 6 federal felonies in 2016. After that, you took more than $200,000 to help get elected. How should people trust you to be running the show to come up with the solution?
I wish you luck with whatever you're working on, but that's a strange question. Look, we're trying to focus on
It's a serious question. You don't think people want an answer to that?
It might make. We are focusing very, very collaboratively.
Well aware of the issue. Is it okay for you to take the money from them with the felony conviction? They're still serving their sentence, for crying out loud.
We have additional questions.
Governor, I've got a policy question about the wild card.
You're not going to answer. You're not going to answer the question.
I don't know what more I can say that will.
You can say whether you agree it was okay to take money from a felon and will you give it back?
So as much as I want those working class communities to rebuild in LA, I don't have much hope. I think these investors are going to swoop in and construct more apartment complexes with complete freedom thanks to Builder's Remedy. And you know what's funny? The investors have to maintain 20% low-income units for only up to 30 years. After that, they can do whatever they want. This reminds me of Bill Ackman's tweet.
Billionaire Bill Ackman tweeted this out last night saying, quote, "When the insurance companies stop writing policies in your city, sell and move out."
He's basically sharing the plan with everyone. Since there will be no insurance, people will leave and land will go to investors like him. And you have to keep in mind these investors don't really care about 30 years. They make investment strategies for 50 or even 100 years. And you know what's going to happen when most of these single-family homes are replaced by high-rise buildings? Well, it's party time for investment managers like BlackRock, since they have made it clear they are not in the business of buying single-family homes. Look, I'm not blaming Leo or these greedy investment companies at all. We all know they only care about making money. It's the politicians we have to hold accountable. These guys were elected to protect these vulnerable communities, but people like Gavin are destroying the very soul of those communities. Now, I want to make it clear that I would love to see more homes for low-income families. I think it's a crime that working-class people are finding it hard to even rent homes in the same cities where they work. But you can't just destroy entire towns and let these rich investors just swallow them up. And once again, Newsom is only one of the culprits here. Karen Bass also played a role in pretty much deciding the fate of her constituents. For instance, she didn't even deploy her crisis response team, which has a budget of $1 million and includes hundreds of volunteers. And how can we forget the fact that people told her what would happen if she made those budget cuts for the fire department?
That our fire department was just recently cut by $23 million in this current fiscal year. And these cuts came at exactly the wrong time, with calls for services at an all-time high and our firefighters at their breaking point.
We have fewer resources today we did in the 1960s when our population was 57% what it is now. This is simply unacceptable. And I'm going to make a bold statement. I'm not scared. I'm going to say what people can't say. If we cut one position, if we close one station, if we close one resource, the residents of Los Angeles are going to pay the ultimate sacrifice, and someone will die. And we want to work with you guys to prevent that from happening. And we have the facts to back it up.
The threats we face from wildfires get worse every year, and the demands we place on our department only increase year after year. LAFD has already lost critical positions and funding needed to staff essential operations. We have $1 million rigs sitting at the yard with no mechanics to fix them. Tools and equipment are outdated, and we have a mounting need for V hours at a time when our city's budget situation is precarious.
But she did that anyway and flew over to Ghana while Los Angeles had a serious fire warning. I'm just amazed how she's still in office. Now, in other news, James Comer, who's the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, has asked the upcoming Attorney General to prosecute Joe Biden's brother, James Biden.
Alleging President Biden's son Hunter and his brother James both lied to Congress when they sat for closed-door interviews just months ago.
In a letter sent to the upcoming AG, Pam Bondi, James Comer wrote, "Hold James Biden accountable for lying to Congress to protect his brother, the soon-to-be former President Biden." He also went on to say, President Biden's latest scheme to cover his family's grift cements his legacy as leading the most corrupt political family to attain the presidency in American history. But it also appears incomplete. President Biden has displayed to the American people that his son is beyond accountability in a court of law for his crimes.
I don't know
what
who you're
business
talking
were they
about.
in?
Well, what business is the Comers in? You're talking about lots of people. There's lots of people in the family.
I'm a farmer.
Your
I have land. I
your
lease
impeachment
land. I sell honey.
investigation must identify
What did
a
the
high crime
Bidens
and
do?
misdemeanor.
What did they do?
I'll
for
tell
the
you what Joe
millions of
Biden
dollars?
did. He was a senator of the United States. Then he wrote a book, and he said he made the most money he ever made in his life, millions of dollars on his book, and he gave $1 million
That's
away
what
to
his
charity.
family did. That's why Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Romania, China, Russia, that's why they paid the Biden family money because of Joe Biden?
None of those
What?
governments paid anyone any money.
He then said in the letter that Hunter Biden's main accomplice is James Biden, and since he has not received any pardon, he can be prosecuted.
You watched Joe Biden deliver a speech that day. Then you had a follow-up conversation with Joe Biden. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
What did Joe Biden tell you during that conversation?
Well, as I've already publicly shared, I was brought backstage by his team because he had just given his keynote, and we just exchanged pleasantries, and then I walked him out to his car, and he specifically thanked me for the work I was doing with his son and his brother and asked me to keep an eye on them.
And my understanding is, Mr. Bobulinski, that after Joe Biden had left, you went across the street to the Peninsula Hotel and had a long conversation with his brother, Jim Biden. Isn't that correct?
I did.
It's my understanding that you asked him how the Biden family does the business that they do, while Joe Biden is such a prominent political figure. What was Jim Biden's response to you?
Correct. I was actually concerned and asking from a position of concern, and Jim Biden's response to me was plausible deniability.
Now, this is big news because this basically gives the DOJ a way to bring Biden to justice and tell the public what Hunter was doing in Ukraine and maybe what really was on his laptop. Now, Pam has already made it clear what she thinks about those pardons.
Clemency, as we discussed, often near the end of an administration, there's a rush to consider pardons. Would you be willing to work at a more institutionalized clemency process where there aren't just lots of commutations near the end of a term, but where there's a regular process where the DOJ and the clemency process is looked at to see whether there are reforms that should be made and recommendations that could be made to the president throughout his term?
I would love to look at that process. I can tell you that the pardons, the commutations that Joe Biden just made were abhorrent to me, absolutely abhorrent, taking people off death row. I looked at the facts of many of those cases, and they were so troubling to me. I don't know what process you intend to implement, but I would love to study that with you.
However, she has also said that she will not be going after anyone just because they opposed Donald Trump.
One will be prosecuted, investigated because they are a political opponent. That's what we've seen for the last 4 years in this administration.
Well,
People will be prosecuted based on the facts and the law and fairly, Senator.
All right, that's good.
So she's basically saying that Biden will likely face justice for his crimes and not just his political position. And that's going to do it for today. I'd love to know what you think about this builder's remedy law. If you live in a suburb, would you want investors to build high-rise mixed-use buildings in your neighborhood? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section below. I truly appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.